What if your biggest life decisions were never really yours? What if the job you chose, the people you're drawn to, the risks you avoid, and even the way you react under pressure were all scripted decades ago by a version of you that didn't yet know how to speak?
Think about it. How many times have you found yourself stuck in the same kind of relationship? The same self-sabotaging pattern? The same aching emptiness? You tell yourself this time is different. This time you've learned. But eventually, the same story unfolds again. The same fears win. The same emotional traps spring shut. And you wonder, why can't I change? The answer might be as disturbing as it is liberating. You're not living as an adult. You're living as a child wearing adult skin. Because the child inside you, the one who felt abandoned, ignored, punished for speaking truth or showing weakness, that child never left. They learned to hide, to adapt, to survive. And somewhere along the way, their wounds became your instincts. Their fear became your wisdom. Their pain became your identity. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But what he didn't say is how deeply that unconscious is rooted in your earliest wounds. We grow older, but our nervous systems don't forget. A disapproving look from a parent becomes a lifelong fear of criticism. A cold household becomes a need to constantly prove your worth. A moment of rejection becomes a script that says, "Don't get too close, they'll leave anyway." So when you say, "I'm just not good at relationships," or "I always mess things up," what if that's not true? What if that's not you talking? What if that's the echo of a child still trying to make sense of a world that hurt them? You've been calling it personality, but it might just be protection. And until you confront the roots, the branches of your life will keep twisting in ways you can't explain. Let's dig into where this all begins, into the quiet war happening inside the psyche. We like to believe we're rational creatures, architects of our fate, sculptors of our identity. But beneath that comforting illusion lies something far older, far deeper, what Jung called the shadow, the repressed, unacknowledged parts of ourselves forged in childhood and buried in the unconscious. This shadow isn't evil, it's protective. It was born the moment you realized that some parts of you were too much for the world to love. Did you learn that crying made people uncomfortable? That anger led to punishment? That expressing joy invited mockery? Those lessons didn't disappear. They just sank. And in their place, masks were formed. The good girl, the responsible one, the people pleaser, the tough guy. But masks, while useful for survival, eventually become prisons. Arthur Schopenhauer once argued that human behavior is not driven by reason, but by a blind, irrational force he called the will. This will, the craving to be seen, to be loved, to avoid pain, lives at the center of your decisions. It doesn't care about logic, it cares about protection. And here lies the hidden problem. You're living not from choice, but from strategy. Emotional strategy, survival strategy. A child who grew up feeling unworthy might chase success not for fulfillment, but to prove they deserve to exist. A child who was rarely comforted might seek intensity in relationships, mistaking chaos for connection. A child who was shamed for needing help might become fiercely independent, pushing others away even when they're drowning. You're not broken, you're patterned. And the patterns are not random. They're maps of early emotional terrain, etched into your nervous system, reinforced by years of repetition, and normalized by a society that rewards functional numbness over emotional truth. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre warned that we often live in bad faith, denying our own freedom by conforming to roles and expectations. But what if the deepest denial happens not in adulthood, but in childhood? When we first learn that who we truly are might not be acceptable? These wounds don't scream, they whisper, and they shape how you love, how you fear, how you dream, and how you hide. And the cost of not seeing them? It's not just pain. It's your life, lived as a ghost of someone you never got to become. Now we ask, what does this cost look like in action? Let's expose the consequences. Silent, sharp, and everywhere. You walk into a room and instantly scan for threats. Not physical ones, but emotional ones. Will they judge you? Will they like you? Will they see through you? This doesn't feel unusual. It feels like you. But what you're really doing is reenacting a script you never wrote. One where safety meant invisibility, where silence was survival. The wounds of childhood do not announce themselves in adulthood with sirens and signs. They creep, they infect. They wear disguises so familiar. You call them personality traits. You say, I'm just a perfectionist. But perhaps, deep down, you were only loved when you got things right. You say, I just don't trust easily. But what if trust once led to betrayal, before you could even speak your truth? You say, I prefer to be alone. But maybe that's because early connection always came with a price: control, shame, or abandonment. The consequences are subtle, yet staggering. Careers are built not on passion, but on fear of failure. Marriages form around emotional avoidance rather than intimacy. Life paths are chosen not out of freedom, but out of unconscious repetition. And society applauds you for it. High achiever, stoic, independent, emotionally controlled. It doesn't see the cost. Neuroscience backs this up. When a child experiences chronic emotional neglect or unpredictable love, their developing brain adapts to detect patterns of threat and rejection. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes hypersensitive. Cortisol floods the system. Fight, flight, or freeze isn't just a momentary response. It becomes a way of living. Even your choices are filtered through cognitive distortions like confirmation bias, seeking only evidence that matches the internal belief. I'm not safe. I'm not enough. People will leave. You attract what feels familiar, not what's healthy. You recreate what hurts you because it's the only language your nervous system understands. And the scariest part? This doesn't feel like trauma. It feels like normal. Until one day, you wake up in a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. Success without meaning, relationships without depth, stability without peace. You wonder, why does nothing feel real? Why do I feel like I'm watching my life instead of living it? The answer is waiting, but it requires rebellion. A quiet war against everything you've accepted as just the way I am. So now, the real question: can you break the spell? To break free, you must do something that feels almost unnatural. Turn toward the pain instead of running from it. The rebellion isn't loud. It doesn't always look like radical action. Sometimes it begins with something far more dangerous: honesty. Radical, uncomfortable, soul-splitting honesty. What if you questioned every truth you hold about yourself? What if I'm just not lovable isn't a fact, but a wound? What if I have to earn rest is just your nervous system mimicking the conditions of your childhood home. This is the moment when the mask cracks, when the adult begins to confront the child within, not to silence them, but to listen. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is shadow work. It's the process of meeting the parts of you you've rejected, your sadness, your rage, your fear, your longing, and bringing them out of exile. But here's the paradox. The pain you've been avoiding holds the key to your freedom. That neediness you hate, it's your heart's request for authentic connection. That anger you suppress, it's a boundary screaming to be acknowledged. That shame, it's the echo of someone else's failure to see your worth. You don't escape these wounds by achieving more. You escape them by turning inward, questioning the voice that whispers you're not enough, and asking whose voice that really is. And this rebellion has practical consequences. It might mean setting boundaries where there were none, choosing stillness where you used to chase validation, saying no to chaos disguised as passion, letting go of people who only love the mask, not the person behind it. It's not easy. The world will resist your healing because healed people are dangerous. They don't obey out of fear. They don't beg to be chosen. They don't perform for love. They remember who they were before the wounding, and from that memory, they begin to build a new self, not a reaction to trauma, but a creation of truth. This is not self-improvement. This is self-reclamation. And once you taste it, even for a moment, there's no going back. Because then, and only then, can you face the final question, the one that changes everything. At the center of all this, the patterns, the pain, the performance, lies a terrifying and liberating truth. You were never broken. The cracks you've spent your life trying to hide were never flaws. They were messages, evidence, sacred imprints from a time when your innocence met the world's failure. And you, small, tender, and unguarded, did what every brilliant child does. You adapted. But adaptation is not identity, and healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Here's the paradox that changes everything. The wounds that shaped every decision were never your fault, but the healing? That's your responsibility. This is where the illusion dissolves, not with guilt, not with blame, but with clarity. Every self-betrayal you've made was an act of survival. Every toxic relationship you tolerated was an echo of the past trying to resolve itself. Every limit you placed on your potential was a story you inherited from someone else's pain. You are not here to repeat the story. You are here to end it. This is where philosophy meets the soul. Nietzsche believed we must become who we are by overcoming what we've been told to be. Jung believed the greatest work of our lives is to integrate the shadow, to bring our unconscious suffering into the light. And Viktor Frankl, a man who survived humanity's darkest hour, said that meaning is not found in happiness, but in response to suffering. Your response begins now. You can keep living on autopilot, letting your childhood write your future. Or you can step into the fire, where pain becomes wisdom and the past loses its grip on your present. The final realization is simple and devastating and beautiful. The version of you that was born from pain is not the version of you that has to live forever. The choice is yours. Stay loyal to the child who had to survive, or finally become the adult who is free to live. Now close your eyes, not to escape, but to return. Because everything you're looking for begins where you were first broken and where you are now ready to rebuild.